Online with AI webinar. My name is Adam Reisfield, and I lead product marketing here at Parabola, and I'm super excited to welcome you all to today's session. Today's session is not necessarily going to be general Parabola overview covering super basic concepts. This is going to be geared primarily towards people who are looking to uplevel maybe a foundational understanding of what you can do in Parabola and really get in the weeds with things like how do we actually connect live systems, build out logic, not going to be running through a pre-made demo, but rather starting from scratch and actually building out a complete end-to-end workflow. To make this session feel a little bit more interactive than just listening to me talk for about 45 to 60 minutes, feel free to drop questions in the chat as we go, and I'll do my best to tackle questions while things are loading, as we hit breakpoints, and as some relevant questions come up. All right, with that, let's get into it. So today, we're not going to be using sample data. We're going to be using data for a real brand and connecting live systems. The brand's data that we are going to be working with is my side business. It is called Lidlace. This is a Shopify store that I've ran for about the last year. Lidlace is an attachable hat rope that clips onto any hat. So as I scroll down here, just to show you some of the products we're working with today, this is what it looks like. Has these little clips. You can clip it onto the inside of the hat. And so the inventory that we're going to be reconciling today is this inventory that lives in Lidlace's backend in Shopify with our Amazon listing. So in Amazon Seller Central, I have one SKU. That SKU has 41 different variants, all of these different colors. And so the problem that I face running this business is when I purchase new inventory, I am putting those new quantities into Shopify, but my Shopify store isn't talking back to Amazon Seller Central. So, for instance, maybe I get 100 new units of the red lace. I put 100 into Shopify, but it still says 18 in Amazon Seller Central. On the flip side, let's say I have a product in Shopify that I sell a lot of. My units decrement in Shopify, that doesn't get back to Amazon Seller Central, creating discrepancies that we are going to want to reconcile on today's call. Let's, on that note, jump into Parabola and start actually building this out. I see one question about can we record? This is automatically being recorded, so we're good to go there. You can access the recording after the session using the same link. All right, so let's start building. I'm going to come in here to Parabola homepage and start building a new flow. Now, the first thing I will call out here is we recently introduced a new experience when you open a new flow where we're immediately asking you what you'd like to build. If you type something in here, that's going to automatically initiate a conversation with Parabola's AI agent kind of experience on the left-hand side here. So in this example, if you were getting started from scratch, you wanted to leverage AI to build this out, you can, for instance, come in here, click on inventory reconciliation, and we're constantly working to improve this process. The goal here is basically to build a task list that outlines all the different things that we would need to do to build an inventory reconciliation from scratch, and then guide you through the process of providing Parabola with more and more information to ultimately help you build that flow from scratch. In a perfect world, this experience looks a lot like working with a member of the Parabola team, where you'd come in here, you tell Parabola what kind of systems you're working with, steps would automatically be added to the canvas, and this kind of guided experience through this AI chat is the way that I recommend building if you're working alone, you're trying to learn Parabola for the first time. You can see the task list getting created here. For the sake of this session, we're primarily going to build with the non-AI chat version of this. We'll still use a lot of AI functionality, but this chat experience I would recommend as the primary way to build when you're independently getting started here. For the sake of this session, I'm going to go ahead, create a new flow, and let's start adding some steps to the canvas here. So whenever we're building a parabola flow, the first thing we need to do is pull in data from all the different sources that it exists. You can see here within integrations, we have native integrations with a whole bunch of different sources like Shopify, NetSuite, Amazon Seller Central, can connect to APIs, pull information from emails, PDFs, you name it. For the sake of this session, there's two main data sources I'm going to work with, Shopify, and we also have Amazon in here. The first thing we're always going to need to do is authenticate our different steps and then pull in our data. So let me get started with Shopify here. In this example, it automatically connected to the Shopify store I had set up. But if you're doing this for the first time, you'll see a blue button here that says authorize. You can come in here, add a new account. Let me just type in lidlace, authorize. You'll get a little authorization window here. You can't see it, but it says authorization complete. And now we are good to go with that authorized account. From here, I'm just going to tell Parabola what information we need to pull in. So I want to pull in product inventory. Let's see, I need to use for the location. The warehouse I'm using is Washington Street. And then I want to make sure I'm pulling in the product title field. Right now, I'm just pulling in some default columns. I actually do want, I have SKU, that's good. I have available, that's what we'll be using. I do actually want some product information in here. So I'm just going to change that toggle. Now it's pulling in 34 columns. And let me just make sure I'm getting my product title field. I can search for that up here. Product title, beautiful. All right, we are looking good. I've got 34 columns of data here. So before I even shift gears and start looking at Amazon, the first thing I always like to do whenever I'm pulling in data is start by just cleaning it up. So let me just name this inventory reconciliation. And then let's clean up these 34 columns that we're looking at here. When we are cleaning data, we're always going to go ahead and use an edit columns step first. We have a question here about, will this be most up-to-date Shopify data? Good question. When we are pulling in steps with these integration steps, we're always pulling in live data directly from whatever systems we're working with. So what you see here in available, if I had a sale 2 minutes ago, that's going to be reflected in this number that we have here. So in this edit column step, I'm going to come in here and really just limit this down to the columns that we need. So in this example, I'm going to use available. We want our SKU column, and then I also want the product title column. I'm going to go ahead and name this available and call it Shopify. I find it really helpful to write out where the data is coming from when we edit columns, because especially if we're combining data from multiple systems, you might have three different quantity fields and you're like, wait, was this the Amazon one? Was this the Shopify one? So let's just name that Shopify. This I'm just going to simplify to SKU. Doesn't hurt to put Shopify in there. And then we can just leave this with product title. And then let me just reorder this product title, SKU, available. Beautiful. All right. Now that I've got this nice and cleaned up, this looks perfect. I'm going to go ahead and shift attention to Amazon Seller Central. For Seller Central, I'm going to come in here same way. I've already set this up. If I hadn't, I could come in here, just say US Marketplace, submit. This is now opening a pop-up where it's just basically asking me to check a box. I hit confirm. We are authorizing Parabola. Success. Beautiful. Now, let's say you are used to building in Parabola and you don't want to go through that process every time of authorizing every single time. If I come in here and hit edit accounts, I can assign one of these as the default account. So every time I use Amazon, it's always using that same one. So this one says added less than a minute ago. If I want my teammates to be able to use this, maybe I'll come in here and say, hey, my whole organization can edit and use this authentication. And then I'm also going to come in here and set this as my default. So now if I go ahead and add a new Amazon step to the canvas, we're always going to automatically use that authentication that we just set up. For the sake of this step, now that I'm authenticated, I want to go ahead and click on my inventory report, previous 1 month, that looks good, update results. And so now this is pulling live data directly from Amazon Seller Central, no CSV download, but just give us a nice clean data set here that then we can clean up similar to Shopify, start combining and go from there. So we'll just give this 1 second to pull on in here. While that's loading, I'm just going to go ahead and add the next step in the process, which is going to be this edit column step. All right, we're looking good. I've got 23 columns here. I can see my quantity field. I can see my SKU. This all looks great. So let's start cleaning. Edit columns. I'm just going to say, hey, let's go ahead and keep these columns. I want SKU. That's going to be our unique identifier that we join on. I'm going to keep quantity, and that's all I need. So let's just call this SKU Amazon, and then let's call this quantity Amazon. All right. Next up, Before we get too deep into building, maybe this is the OCD that follows me around, but it is a good best practice in Parabola, always documenting everything that we're doing. So it's really easy for you to understand what you were doing in what parts of the flow. And also so that if you hand off a flow to a teammate, they're not like, oh my gosh, what is this monstrosity that Adam built here? But rather they're looking at something that's really well documented and easy to follow. So, little pro tip for you here. If you hold down Shift, you can click and drag a box. Once you select multiple steps, if you right click, you can add multiple steps to a card. So, I'm going to go ahead and call this pull inventory from Shopify. And then I'll do the same thing down here. Right click, add to card, and let's call this pull inventory from Amazon. All right. I love a good emoji, so let's go ahead and put a little Shopify emoji in here, and then maybe I want this to be green. Flip side, I can throw a little Amazon emoji in here, and then let's make this orange. All right, we're looking good. So from here, something that we see commonly is you might have SKUs from one system that don't necessarily perfectly match SKUs from another system. Maybe there's some amount of data cleanup that needs to happen in there. If, for instance, I wanted to split the data where we have multiple dashes, or I wanted to extract a part of the SKU, do something like a find and replace, all those options are going to be found in this transforms section here. So if you're trying to understand like what is the scope of transformations I can do in Parabola, this is one good place to look. Another place, if you're ever in doubt, is just by asking this AI chat exactly what you're trying to do. So if I wanted to find and replace part of my SKU, how do I do it? Do I do it? From there, Parabola is going to search all of our product documentation, look at examples of how steps are typically configured. It'll look at the data in your process to have a better and more contextualized understanding of what to do. And then it'll give you a little overview of what step to use, and it'll even take it a step further and often start adding steps directly to the canvas. So it's telling me, hey, we actually have a find and replace step. This is what it lets you do. You can add multiple rules. It'll link you out to the docs, and then it'll create a little task list to basically execute on my request. Now, this request was extremely vague, as you can see, but the more specific your prompt, and when I say specific, we're doing things like referencing specific values and exactly what we want to replace, referencing the names of columns, the better it will be. So this is actually pretty cool. What text do you want to find in your SKU, and what would you like to replace it with? Based on the values that are actually in my data set yet, it's saying, hey, par dash, I don't really know what that means. Maybe you want to replace it with skew dash. Maybe you want to remove the couple of dashes. Maybe you want to capitalize. So it's just giving you some ideas here. And then you can always come in here and say, no, actually, I'm trying to do this in my find and replace. Moving on from there, now let's start thinking about how we actually combine these siloed values that we have between Shopify and Amazon. Now, there's two ways to combine data in Parabola. If I click on my transformations, here I can see in the tables section, those options at the very top here. So we have stack tables and we have combined tables. I'm going to show you stack tables first. Let me tell you, this is the incorrect step to use, but it's helpful to understand the difference. Stack tables is basically putting one table on top of the other. So if I have 10 rows and 10 rows, I'm going to have 20 rows after a stack table step. When you come in here, we're always going to combine those two data sets and use matching headers. So in this example, my SKU Amazon column, we only have 41 columns because, or 41 rows, excuse me, because in our second table where we have 100 rows, there's no column called SKU Amazon. So all we're getting left with are these 41 rows. But if I said, hey, I actually don't want to match based on column names, I just want to combine all of this data together, then it's going to ignore the column names. It's going to combine 100 and 41 and just give me all of my SKUs and all my quantities here. But now things don't match. This isn't really what we want to do, right? So I'm going to go ahead and delete this step. And instead, I'm going to use a combine table step here. And this is going to be like a VLOOKUP on steroids, an index match without the crazy syntax. All you need to do is just drag our arrows into this step and then basically set up these rules the same way that you would set up the logic for a VLOOKUP if you were to just like write it out without the crazy syntax. So I'm going to say, I want to match the data where my SKU from Amazon matches my SKU from Shopify. Let's update our results. And now we can see we have a nice combined data set here. I can see my SKU from Amazon, my quantity from Amazon, my product title, and my available quantity. Now, there's a little nuance here that I want to point out as far as how many rows we are keeping. Since this process is really focused on validating my Amazon Seller Central inventory, I don't care about SKUs that I have in Shopify that don't exist in Amazon. Let me give you an example of this. In Shopify, if I go to shop all, and let me actually show you. So I have these products that say extra thick in them, where this is like a bit thicker than the normal lace we offer. I just sell this on Shopify. I do not sell it on Amazon. So I don't care about it for the sake of this inventory reconciliation. When we join our data here, I specifically set this up so that in our edit column step from Amazon, you can see we are keeping all of our rows from Amazon, and we're only finding the matching rows from our Shopify data. So in our Amazon, we had 41. In Shopify, we had 100. Our results, we only have 41, representing my 41 variants of my SKU in Amazon. Now that we are good to go on that front, I would want to do a little bit of data cleanup here just so this looks a little bit better. So I'm going to use one more edit columns. This is definitely my most used step to maintain really nice clean data as I build. So I'm going to call this product title. Let's just call this SKU. And then we have quantity for Amazon and Shopify. While this loads, if you do have any questions so far, feel free to throw them in the chat. I'll be tackling questions as we go. So make sure to drop them in as we build. Cool. This is looking good to me. We have product title, SKU, and now our two quantity fields. And so now I want to get into actually determining discrepancies that exist here with a little math calculation. Before we do that, I'm going to put these on a new card just so we document as we go. So let's say join and identify discrepancies. Throw a little emoji in there and give it some color. Whoops. All right, cool. So next thing I want to do is calculate discrepancies. If I was to ask Parabola, calculate inventory discrepancies, what we're doing here behind the scenes is referencing product documentation, examples of different steps, and that documentation is all available on our website in the use case template library. So if I come in here, you can either search for different keywords or use cases, or just click on a given use case and you can actually copy a version of this flow directly into your account. So on this page, I could, for instance, click around and just see what usually goes into an inventory reconciliation. Or you can scroll down, get step-by-step guidance. This is the guidance that we use to train that AI that you were just looking at, and it'll help you guide through that whole process. If I jump back into this step now, we can see we've added a new calculate inventory discrepancies step on the canvas. If I want to understand what Parabola is actually doing here, I can click in, see, okay, we added this step. We're making our way through this task list. And now if I open up this step, you can see we're calculating inventory discrepancy by doing our Amazon inventory minus our Shopify inventory. This looks great to me. All right. Just to one more time explain why these discrepancies exist to help contextualize this a little bit more. This is saying for my dark green lace that in Amazon I have 5 and in Shopify I have 53. This totally makes sense to me. I had 5 units. I ordered 50 more. So I was at 55 and then I sold 2. So that explains the discrepancy. And now it's saying I'm underreporting Amazon inventory by 48 units. I don't want to risk having a stock out in Amazon. So I want to make sure I resolve that. So what we're going to do from here is one, set an inventory status so that we understand discrepancies across Amazon. 2, we're going to trigger alerts via email and Slack. And then 3, we are going to use Amazon's price and quantity import template so that we can create a CSV file that automatically gets sent to us that we can drop in Amazon Seller Central that's going to automatically update those inventory levels. I had one question here from Diana on if it's possible to find and replace in case you need to amend formats of some of your imports. Can absolutely do this. A couple ways that we can do that. One is by just asking Parabola, hey, can I do a find and replace? And then it's going to add that step directly to the canvas. Or you can just go ahead, search, find, and replace, and then it's going to give you some options here to specify which columns you'd like to look at, or if you'd like to look at the entire table, and then we can add specific values and say exactly what we'd like to replace with. Super helpful for things like SKU cleanup, especially when we're working with third-party and marketplace SKUs. Now, once we have all of our discrepancies identified, now I basically want to understand where Shopify or where Amazon is underreporting inventory, overreporting inventory, or valid. And so now I'm going to come in here, and there's a couple ways we could do this. One is with our if else step, where we're basically saying if quantity is less than zero, assign this, otherwise do this. In this example, though, I really like using a custom transform step. With the custom transform step, you can provide plain language instructions, and then we're behind the scenes, we're using AI to generate custom code based on your instructions that we apply against the data set. What's so great about this step, it basically brings the barrier to entry to zero for thinking through logic and building out the underlying logic here. And it also makes it really easy to look back and understand what we're doing in a flow. Because if someone built with custom transforms, they hand you off a flow, you can just read it and understand exactly what they're trying to do. So I'm going to start with the most basic prompt you've ever seen, and then I'm going to let Parabola try to optimize it just so you can see how this kind of works. So your instructions, assign an inventory discrepancy status based on the, what's the based on the inventory discrepancy column. I'd like to flesh this out more, but first I'm going to hit optimize prompt, and we're going to let Parabola worry about how to actually bake best practices into the prompts here. Let me take a second while Parabola's thinking to answer some questions here. So we had one question about how can we match SKUs with different descriptions. So two things I'll point to. One, always going to work best when we do have a nice unified identifier that we can join on that doesn't always exist. So if it doesn't exist, we would either need some kind of business rules that say, hey, whenever we're pulling data from this marketplace, we always need to do this find and replace. We need to extract this part. We need to append this prefix. If we're able to build out those business rules, that's one approach. Another approach is by using steps like standardize with AI, which is like a more nuanced find and replace, where we can provide examples of a wide range of different values and say, hey, if you see anything that looks like this, I want you to replace it with this value. So there's the deterministic logic way, and then there's the more nuanced interpretation way to work with non-matching SKUs. The other question here was around how do we book discrepancies to different COGS accounts based on the reason. So for example, lost by Amazon has different accounting treatment than difference between sales. How might we automate the process of identifying the reason for the variance? Really good question. Ultimately, if you have business rules written out for how you would do that logic manually, we'll be able to replicate that same kind of logic in Parabola. So I imagine there's something in your Amazon seller data that basically helps you understand, was this lost or was this a discrepancy with how we're reporting sales? Those are really good examples for the if else step or even this custom transform step that we're using right now, where we can basically say, hey, if you see X, Y, or Z in the data, that tells us that we should book it as lost by Amazon. However, if you see these values, then we actually want to book it under a different COGS account. So as much as we can build out that logic, the easier it'll be to create. So I'm going to jump back into our custom transform step here where we just hit optimize prompt, and let's see what we got. So Parabola replaced this with assign an inventory discrepancy based for each row based on the value in the discrepancy column. If inventory discrepancy is zero, assign match. If it's greater than zero, assign overstocked or understocked. And then, all right, this all looks good. I always like to add a little bit of color here. It's easier for me to just scan through. So I'm just going to go ahead and add some emojis in here. We've got our green circle for a match. For overstocked, I'm going to just put in a little up indicator. And then for understocked, I'll go ahead and put a little down arrow in here. All right, and let me make sure it's using the right logic. So if Shopify is showing 50 and Amazon's showing 57, overstocked, that looks good to me. Understocked, all right, cool. This all looks great. I'm gonna hit update results. While that's updating, one thing I'll point out is down here, the logic summary at the bottom. This is going to show you what the underlying code is actually doing to your data, right? So if you want to understand exactly what's happening, we don't believe in building like black box AI. I think that's a big reason why so many of these pilot programs fail is because people don't know how to actually deploy it. And then even when you do deploy it, you don't know how it's actually working. Our goal with processes like this is just to show you exactly how that data is working step by step. And now we can see here in the discrepancy status column, all those nice emojis giving us a good sense of where we're matching, where we're understocked, and where we're overstocked. All right, we're looking good. So now let's first move into the alerting piece of this, because realistically, this is if you're doing inventory reconciliations manually today, you're probably not doing this as frequently as you might like. In a perfect world, you have an intern maybe doing this all day, every day, ensuring that you never have any stockouts and you're always selling everything you have available. Realistically, maybe you're doing it once a week, once every other week. In peak season, that's going to pick up to maybe like multiple times a day. Ultimately, with alerting, you basically are constantly reconciling inventory and only being alerted when there's actual discrepancies that you need to action on based on your filter rules. Like some teams, if there is a discrepancy of less than 2% and you're nowhere near your replenishment threshold, you have a solid cushion, maybe you don't need an alert even if there is a discrepancy. For my purposes, I'm not dealing with the highest inventory levels here, as you can see. I want to get alerted with any discrepancy that we have here. So I'm going to keep rows where my inventory discrepancy is not equal to 0. Not equal to 0, update results. You can see we're starting with 41 rows of data here. After I update this, now we're down to 10. I can see everywhere that we are under and overstocked. This is looking good, and then I can see exactly what the discrepancy was right here. Cool. I'm going to name this alert team of discrepancies. I'll throw a little alerting emoji in here, and let's make this guy red. Cool. Now that I have this in, I'm going to go ahead and send this off to two places. The first is going to be Slack, which I think is a really useful place to send data for team visibility. I'm going to come in here and let's first connect to my Slack account. So I've set this up before. If I haven't, what you can see right now is a nice little pop-out window. I'm just hitting allow for Parabola to access my channels and send messages. And so when we have a discrepancy, I want to send a single message, not one row for every discrepancy. And I'm going to send this in a channel. Let's go ahead and create that channel. So let's go ahead, create channel. Let's call this ops alerting public create. All right, cool. Now, as soon as I create this, if I jump back into Parabola and refresh my results, Parabola is now going to pull in that new channel. So let's go ahead, ops alerting, and then I want to provide a little message to the team. So I'm going to say, hey team, discrepancies identified for the SKUs listed below. If you did want to add some formatting here, this will link you out to Slack's documentation here. So for instance, if you want to use italics, I can use little underscores if I want to put bold, strike through, so on and so forth. So let's bold discrepancies identified. Maybe I want to throw in a little emoji there too. I can put a little alerting emoji in here. Discrepancies identified for the SKUs listed below. All right. And I actually do want to attach some data here. So let's attach the entire table as a CSV, some other options. You could attach a file by a URL if you want to attach some data that way. But let's call this discrepancies and I want to know how we're looking. So if I hit message settings, I'll include a link to the flow. I don't need to expand URLs. We can link usernames and channels. Cool. I'm going to test this. So once I hit send test message, as soon as this processes, if I jump over to my Slack instance, awesome. We've received a notification. Hey team, discrepancies identified. I can see all the data here, and then it links back to the Parabola flow. Something that we see a lot is someone says, hey, there's discrepancies. How do we know there are discrepancies? Like, what process did you follow? What was your SOP? This is a really easy way to link someone back to the SOP. They can explore it, understand exactly how the data was transformed. And now if we jump back into our flow, since we are good to go on this front, now let's jump over to email. So email a file attachment. I can connect our arrows. and very similar process that will follow here. I don't really feel like setting this up. It feels like a lot of work right now. So I'm just going to say set up my email a file attachment step. All right. While this is loading, I want to talk through one cheeky little thing that we're going to do next, which is try to use AI to give us a kind of like human plain language summary of our discrepancies that we can include in the note that we are creating here. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to use an experiment with AI step. This is like a experiment with AI. This is a beta step that we offer right now, basically taking into consideration our table of data, and then can either add new rows, look for duplicates, synthesize data. So I'm going to say summarize the discrepancies in the table and provide a one cell summary for the team to gauge urgency. Let's see how this goes. So this is going to put everything into just one cell. This is basically what I want the message to say. So this says high urgency, multiple products are significantly understocked, requiring immediate attention to restock. Cool. I'm happy with this. So let's say I wanted this to basically be like the first row of my table, and then I wanted all the data. If you remember that stack tables step that we looked at earlier, I'm going to go ahead and use that here. So let's go ahead and make this value our first in the data set. Going to just clean up my flow a little bit. And then on top of that, I want to stack all the data that we were looking at earlier. So if I come in here now, I don't want to match up data by column names. I just want to basically stack this on top of each other. So we can see now in our first column, we have that high urgency. I'm going to flip this around actually. I first want to connect my table, and then let's put our summary at the bottom. All right, so now I can see I have all of my columns here. Whatever you connect first, that's basically the table schema we're going to use. So I'm using 6 columns here, and then we're just stacking this at the bottom. So now at the very bottom, I can see I have that value. When we use merge tags in Parabola or dynamic values, we're going to use the values from the first row of our data set. So now I basically want to get this in row 1. How do I change the order of data in Parabola? That's going to be the same way you change data, the order in Excel with a sort. Let's go ahead and drop a sort on in here. I'm going to sort this skew. Let's try A to Z. If it's not A to Z, then it's Z to A. Let's see. Beautiful. All right, so now we've got this at the very top. This is going to be a useful merge tag. So now I can go ahead and connect this. I'll use that parabola branded. All right, let's send Adam at parabola. Oh, you know what? I'll use my lidlace.com discrepancies. And then for the body of the email, I'm going to use the product title field. By putting in product title, what it's actually putting in is this little text blurb that we have right here. I can have this just reply to me, update results. And so when I hit update results here, this isn't actually going to trigger an email to my account quite yet. What I need to do first is go ahead and click run flow here. And then this is actually going to run this whole flow, send an email to my account. Just for the sake of calling it out, this experiment with AI, a little step here, totally unnecessary for the sake of the process. You could just come in here, write out, hey, inventory discrepancies identified, review the attached CSV to see discrepancies, just showing you a range of functionality here. While this processes, the next thing that we're going to go ahead and do is just create a little reporting dashboard so we understand the basically severity of these discrepancies and can just quickly get basically like customer health, SKU health insights in just one quick little view here. So we'll do that by creating a little visualization based on all of these different SKU statuses that we are creating. Now, the other thing that I will show you while this loads is where we are going from here with this flow. And that's going to be with updating the actual quantities in Amazon. So we'll get to that in just a second, but I do see that this finished processing. So let me open up my inbox. Discrepancies, very cool. So here is that message that we created with AI. High urgency, multiple products are significantly overstocked. And then I have a copy of that table at the very bottom here, so you can come in and read all that data. Now, for me personally, this is readable. I'd like a nice pretty graph to go along with this. So let's go ahead and create that now in Parabola. I'm going to move this up here. Let's create a new card. Let's call this reporting dashboard and can give this a little graph. All right, cool. So let's go ahead and add a visualize step here. A visualize step is the easiest way to create dashboards and visualizations in Parabola. And there's a few different types of reports and dashboards that we can create here. The first thing I want to do, I just want like high level visibility around like how many SKUs I have with discrepancies. And so let's go ahead first. I jumped the gun. Let's do a little filtering first. And you know what? Why use a new filter step? We already have one. Quick little tip here. If you click on a step and hit the key D, that is going to duplicate a step for you, or you can come in here and hit this little duplicate button. So I'm just going to duplicate that, swap around my arrows, and plug this guy in here. All right, so now we're filtering just for our discrepancies. We have 10 here. And now in our visualization, let me first just get some like high level metrics. So in this step, this top left is going to be how you control different types of visualizations. You can create just plain old data tables. You can create different charts, line graphs. In this case, I want to do just featured metrics. These are going to be like the big KPIs at the top of your report. So let me call this total SKUs with discrepancies. And then maybe I want this to be a count of all unique product titles formatted as a number, 10 total SKUs, that looks good. And then maybe I also want to show, just for the sake of giving you a different example, total Amazon inventory. And then we could come in here and say, hey, let's look at our quantity in Amazon. Let's sum it all up. And then let's have it formatted as numbers. Obviously, not the most important metric here, but we could go ahead and do the same for Shopify just to give us a quick sense of the data. I'll come in here, say available in Shopify, formatted as a number. Let's sum it. And so now we have some basically like headline metrics to look at. Now, from here, I'm going to go ahead and create another table that is showing us basically how many we have of each discrepancy status. So I could hit this little option. This is going to be the kind of like a pivot table option where we can assign how we want information grouped. So I'm going to come in here and group by discrepancy status. And then maybe I want like a count beneath each of those, right? I can click in here and see we have 5. But if I click here, I can say, hey, let's count all. That's going to give me now a count of how many understocked and overstocked I had. And you know what? I actually do want to come in here, and then I also want to sum up our values here. So now I can see our total Amazon and Shopify inventory here as well, just helping us build out that view. If for whatever reason I didn't want this SKU value here, I could come in here and say, hey, let's actually hide SKU. Maybe I want to freeze the first column so it's a little bit easier to scan. Maybe I want to change the color, but a lot of different ways that you can customize these reports. Last thing I'll show you here is just a little chart view or a column chart. So I could come in here and say inventory health. Maybe my x-axis is going to be that status. And then our y-axis is going to be a count of product titles. And then maybe I want to show some data labels. So we have 5 overstock SKUs, we have 5 understock SKUs. As soon as we start creating this whole dashboard here, this information is also going to show up directly on our dashboard view as well. So right now I'm in the canvas, as you can see by this tab. If I jump over to the dashboard, now we've created this, where I can see those headline metrics at the top. I have my little pivot table, and then we have our visualization down here at the bottom. And if I want to, for instance, make this shorter, and then I want to make that shorter, you can customize this to look and feel exactly how you'd like. Now that we're good to go on the reporting front, ultimately, I don't want to just be notified that, hey, there are discrepancies. I actually want to go update them in Amazon so that I'm not dealing with these discrepancies anymore. So if I go into Amazon, we can go ahead and navigate into our catalog. And then there's this option to add products via upload. This is going to be really useful for those bulk uploads and correcting our inventory. So I could come in here and say, hey, let's download a template and let's use the update price and quantity template. Once I download this, it's going to give me an Excel sheet. That Excel sheet is going to look like this, where there's some instructions on how to use the file, has data definitions, and then it has a little template for upload. Now, whether you're using Amazon or any other system, what I really want to show you in this part of the session is how we can take data and map it into a different upload template so that no matter what system you need to upload data to, you can get it into that really precise format. Because as you probably know, if you have any discrepancies with column headers, formats, ordering, it's going to fail to import and it's really annoying to create these things manually. Got a good question here around can we email out dashboards outside of your party? So it's definitely one of our most requested features, something I personally hope we build in the future. Right now, the best way to do that is by sharing a dashboard via email with someone that has access to your Parabola instance. So I could come in here, for instance, copy this URL, and then maybe when I email out a file attachment to the team, I could say review dashboard here, and then I can include a link to the dashboard so they're directly linked there. Really good question. Wish I had a better option for you there, but that's going to be the best way for the time being. Or you could always go ahead and do something like let's link out to a Google Sheet. Maybe you create some kind of graph in a Google Sheet and then you're linking to that if you're truly working with outside parties that don't have Parabola access. Obviously, not ideal, but all to say, wherever is going to be the easiest place for partners to consume that data ultimately can make sure that we can get it there. There was also a question here. Is there a way to chunk by, say I have different managers for different product types, and I wanted to email each manager only their product type? Really good question here. The best way to do that is going to be by using information coming from whether it's Shopify or Amazon to ultimately help route emails to the right place. Let's see, do I have collection information in here? I don't. Do I have tags in here? Yes, I do. So we have a collection of tags. Let's say there's the USA product line, right? I could do something like, hey, I want to go ahead and create a couple different filter rules. Maybe I have one filter rule here for where keep rows where my tag contains USA. And then for our product manager managing our USA collection of SKUs, I then could only email them if there is actually a discrepancy in that collection. And then once we set up this logic, if I select both of these, hit D to duplicate, I then can just replicate that logic for other collections. So all to say, not necessarily all within the chunking, all within one step, but by creating filter rules, we can break it out so we're only notifying the right people about the right discrepancies. I appreciate the questions. Awesome. All right, so now we're going to move on to actually creating this import template in Parabola. So you can see for me to update quantities in Amazon, we need SKU, price, minimum and maximum allowed price, quantity handling time, and fulfillment channel. So let's go ahead and build that out really quickly here. I've already got my alerting up here. I've got my dashboards in the middle. Now I want to come ahead and add a new card here to create Amazon quantity and price template. I'll go ahead and slap an Amazon emoji on here, give this a little color. And then the first thing I want to do, I don't necessarily need all of these columns. What I actually want to update in Amazon is the quantity based on what we have in Shopify, because that is my personal source of truth. For you, it might be your WMS, it might be NetSuite. For me, it's Shopify. So I'm going to come in here and use an edit column step. And I'm just going to keep the columns that we need that we actually have for this. We don't have price. We'll have to figure that out. Seller allowed, so on and so forth. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say, let's just keep these columns. I need SKU. I need available from Shopify. And that's it. I need this to be lowercase and I need this to just be called quantity. So let's come in here and let's name this quantity. Let's name this lowercase SKU. Update our results. And so now we have these two columns here. Now I need to add in everything else. When it comes to adding columns, the best step there is going to be the add text column step. And so we can come in here and add exactly what we need. We need price. I'll add these values in a second. We need our minimum seller allowed price, our maximum seller allowed price, and handling time and fulfillment channel. Okay, handling time and fulfillment channel. Now I can quickly flesh this out with some details here. So on Amazon, these are listed at $11.99 with free shipping. That differs from Shopify. In Shopify, I sell these for $9.95 and then offer free shipping if you order four or more. So I don't want to necessarily just use the price value that we're pulling in from Shopify because it is different. I could build if else rules where I'm saying if we're using these sales channels at these prices, for the sake of this, since I sell everything at the same price in Amazon, I'm just going to go ahead and type in my 11.99 number there. Now, for our minimum price, for some of these, I have a business price in Amazon of 10.99, so I'm just going to use that as my minimum. My maximum, I'll go ahead and set that as 11.99. Handling time, I can use one, and fulfillment channel is default. I'm not using FBA. I'm just fulfilling these from my bedroom in my apartment. So that will do the trick for this one. And so now this is looking good, but it's not in the correct order. So I'm just gonna one more time use an edit column step. You could make the argument that this is not efficient to use two edit column steps in one little process here. I personally love to clean my data as I go. So I am okay with maybe trading off a little bit of efficiency for just readability and making it really clear what we're doing where. So let me make sure this is right. Price, minimum, maximum quantity. All right, price, minimum, maximum quantity. And there we go. This now is Amazon's perfect template. I can now go ahead and when this flow runs, maybe I want to email this to myself. I could Slack this to myself. And ultimately, this allows you to gut check exactly what data we have when you receive it. And then for this, maybe I want to come in here and actually just link directly to this page. So I'm going to Adam base.com, update inventory, body the email, drop this CSV file into Amazon price and quantity uploader with a little link here. And so what this makes really easy is basically serving someone up the exact data that they need with instructions on what they should do next. So someone knows exactly what they should do with this data. I'll update results. And now this piece is looking good to go. Cool. All right. As we work on rounding out this flow now, feel free to drop any questions that I have not gotten to yet in the chat. We'll make sure to hit them in the next 10 minutes here. All right. So now that this is good to go, I'm going to go ahead and run this flow. What this is now going to do is pull live data from Amazon and Shopify. So if I have had live sales since I started building this, we'll see that all reflected here. It'll trigger that Slack message with my discrepancies. It'll alert the team. It'll update my dashboard. And then ultimately, it will send an email to myself with that exact upload template. Now, a use case that we hear about a lot is, hey, I have a Google Doc that outlines my full SOP. I have my Parabola flow. How do I understand exactly what we're doing in different parts of the flow? How do I make it really easy to hand off this process, understand exactly what we're doing step by step? One really useful application for the AI chat here in Parabola is process documentation and asking questions about your process to better understand the logic. So imagine I am now inheriting this flow from someone else on my team, and I'm saying, how are we assigning discrepancy statuses in the flow? Parabola's going to look at all the steps in the canvas. It's going to understand which steps are actually determining that discrepancy status. And then it's going to give me a little summary. So it's saying, hey, you're using the custom transform step to do this. Here is the logic. And it's in this step. You can find documentation here. Maybe I actually want this to be a little bit clearer, right? I can see custom transform. It's not actually telling me that step is doing that based on the name. So I'm going to go ahead and say in the join and identify discrepancies card, update step names to be more descriptive. Now Parabola is going to look at what we're doing in each one of those steps and ultimately update all of those names. We can see the little task list, so we know exactly what Parabola is doing here, updating step titles to be more descriptive. And now we can see we have all of these nicely documented. So it's really easy to understand what we're actually doing here. To round this out in the last couple of minutes here as we get to the end of our session, I now don't want to have to run this manually. I want to run this automatically so that I know exactly when there are discrepancies. So I'm going to come in here and click on this little lightning bolt button in the top right. Let's add a recurring schedule. I want this to run for my purposes. I only need this about once a week. You might need to do this more frequently, up to every 10 minutes, hourly, whatever it might be. And now every Monday at 8 a.m. This is going to run and it's going to serve me up all of that data. Now, let me round us out here with some of the last questions we got here in the chat. Feel free to keep them coming. From Kelsey, is it possible to send the email with a table of discrepancies in the body of the email, but with a different PDF attachment on the same email? Good question here. So in our email, a file attachment step, today we have the ability to put the value from a specific cell. We can link out to something. We can attach the name of a file. Can't exactly put the table in the body unless we are using some custom HTML. So let me show you what that looks like really quick. It's less intimidating than it sounds like. So we have a step called send emails by row. What this step lets you do is format the body of an email as HTML. So let me show you. This will be cool if it works. Hopefully I can get this to work in less than 5 minutes. If I use a custom transform step here, this step is really good at taking like code-like operations. So let's say create an HTML table of this data that I can drop in the body of an email. All right, return just one single cell. Okay, update results. What this is going to do is now, if my prompt is good enough for the time being, take all of this, turn it into HTML, and then from there, what we can do is just drop it directly into the send email by rows. I'm gonna go ahead and use ChatGPT, create a simple HTML email body where I can drop in a variable containing an HTML table. All right, don't let me down, ChatGPT. Give us a little blurb here. While that processes, let's see how our custom transform step is doing. All right, that all loaded. Cool. This gave us a nice little table here. Selects data from the table, converts it to HTML. All right, I'm just going to use a little HTML visualizer here just to see what Parabola gave us. This could obviously be improved, but it looks pretty good for what we're going for here. And then Parabola gave us OpenAI gave us a more complicated HTML than we need. So I'm just going to go ahead and drop this in without any additional text here. So I need a recipients column. I'm going to use an add text column step to just add that in here. So let's set the email is going to be adam@lidlace.com, update results. Now in our send email by row step, we're going to say our recipient is going to be the value in the email column, subject discrepancies, body. I'm going to put in that HTML table directly in here. And now, when we go ahead and run this flow, we should see that I receive an email with this in the body. I understand that's a little bit more complex than the other steps that we've looked at, but hopefully shows you a nice little workaround to get that data in the body. I know you asked about PDF attachments as well. That's something that we could link. We can't necessarily attach another file in an email. However, in the Slack message that we send, we do have the ability to include a file based on a URL. So you could include the PDF that way. For the other question here from Brian, can you add a step to identify what's driving a discrepancy in inventory between systems? For example, pulling transaction or inventory movements to identify what point the discrepancy started. Ultimately, yes, if you're able to outline the business rules, not to be a broken record here, but Parabola is really excellent when you can draw a bulleted process that you would do manually for identifying those things. So if you were able to say, hey, we would first look at these transactions in this system, we'd compare them against the transactions in this system, we'd look to find if any transactions from one system were missing from another, and then we'd want to isolate those transactions and look at those. We could totally do that in Parabola. There are steps like find overlap to make that really quick and easy. All just depends on the business rules you're working with. Awesome to hear that Angela has found some success doing that as well. The very last thing here, grand finale, I'll look at my email and see if this came through successfully as a nice table for us. So I have some discrepancies from Parabola, updated inventory, and then did I send this to the right email address? Adam@lidlace.com, Parabola branded, subject discrepancies. Let's see. Beautiful. Here we go. All right, here is your grand finale, Kelsey. We have all of our discrepancies in the body of the email here. We could obviously add a little bit of an intro. We could link back to the flow. We could do whatever kind of customization you would like here. But this is how we are end-to-end automating our inventory reconciliation process. If you left today feeling inspired, I would encourage you to check out Parabola University, where we have a course that walks you through all of the fundamentals here. We also have, as I mentioned earlier, a whole library of templates that you can download for free into your account. So inventory reconciliation is one of them, but there's a whole lot more as well. My email is adam@parabola.io. If you do have any feedback on today's session or questions, definitely feel free to reach out. But I really appreciate you all joining me for a full 60 minutes here. Hope you enjoyed, and please catch us on the next event. Thanks a lot, everyone. Appreciate it.